it's not what he's playing. It's not the chord that he's hitting. You know, it's what's between it. It's the stop. It's in between it that is where you feel the story he's telling in the music.
How did you figure out your voice?
I yelped into the wind, and no. You know what? You know, when you asked me that question, immediately the first thing that popped into my mind, and it really has nothing to do with anything we're discussing, was the first few lines of James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and what that story and that book means as a tale about this modernist tale that is descriptive of how an artist reaches his voice. That is descriptive in the way that it tells how that artist reaches his voice. Because anybody familiar with Portrait of an Artist knows that it is it starts with these kind of weird little phonetics, because he's just a baby, and he's looking out on a pasture, and he sees cows, and he's like moo cow and stuff like that, and then it slowly develops into what becomes a language that starts to become sophisticated, which is is considered like what people said was brilliant about James Joyce, and it is brilliant. Also, they said that James Joyce apparently was very, very influenced. It was like he was the very first generation of novelists that were influenced by cinema. Cinema had influence on writing the novel, as opposed to, and that was early cinema, very early cinema. Yeah, because I just got lost in thinking about Portrait of the Artist.
Well, that's
it's
okay.
such a good book.
We'll put a link down to it below.
You know,
Okay.
Okay. So, how I figured it out, I talked a little bit about that before, and that really was kind of discovering how to write in these terse sentences. I already had a sense of how to write decent dialogue, and I was just honing that along with creating these little terse bursts of description to create the scene structure. That was working for me. Simultaneously, I learned how to outline. Now, outlining for me at that time was something I used a structure of 12 beats. I think in the beginning, the way I worked it out, and also the way I was taught, because there was various areas that I picked up some of the skill set that I had. I'd read, of course, The Art of Dramatic Dramatic Writing. I also was very fond of some of David Mamet's essays and books. I took a couple courses here and there. And so I distilled it down to writing a premise or a log line for the overall idea of what the story would be, and that premise or log line has is elastic in itself, meaning that it can evolve, it can change over time. You can always return to it and augment it in some way as you are going through the writing process. And then for each of the 12 beats of my screenplay, so basically when I say 12 beats is if a screenplay is technically 120 pages, there's a beat for every 10 pages, all right? And then you're thinking of the story, and we're talking the story now, as an EKG, all right? So what I mean by an EKG, and you can also apply this to Christopher Vogler's ideas on the hero's journey as well. The EKG is like you are lifting off with your inciting incident. The inciting incident technically should occur anywhere from like the 5-page to like, well, in the old days it was like 5-page to 30-page, but like it's really just 5 pages now. You really don't go farther than that. And then what you do is you plateau off as you get towards the middle of the EKG. So that's like page 60, and that means basically that your characters or your protagonist is on his way to towards his journey, and so that's beat 6. And then on beat 9, you are coming all the way down on your EKG. You're spiking downward because they are facing all of their adversity and all of their obstacles that they must overcome, that they may never recover from. And then if they do recover and they do succeed and they win in the end, then that EKG comes all the way back up at 12. If they don't win, then that EKG comes all the way up at 11 and then goes sharply down at 12. So that is basically that 12-point beat outline. Now, with the 12-point beat outline, each one of those beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, has its own premise. So every 10 pages, or approximately 10 pages, because you don't have to adhere strictly to 10 pages, because maybe you have a shorter script, has its own log line. So you go, this is when such and such happens, such and such occurs. Cause and effect. It's a cause and effect statement. That is something that has a whole chapter in Lajos Egri's the art of dramatic writing, is the cause and effect statement. That goes all the way back. That can apply all the way back to the Greeks, and he takes it there. So you do that for each one of those beats, and then from each one of those log lines, you use those as a basis to work on, to script those 10 pages, or roughly those 10 pages. And then if you adhere to that, you'll probably get yourself a first draft. It may not be much of a first draft, but it'll be something that you can rewrite and that you can work on. Now, that was my process back in the early days. And that's how I figured things out. Once you're writing the second draft, once I was rewriting at that point, that's where I start to apply a little bit of those tricks, a little bit of the fun stuff. That's a whole other bit of tools and things like that. There's refining that goes in with that sort of thing. You want to look at your script as what is necessary in the story, and try to take out what is not necessary. Now, this is one thing that I do believe many storytellers fail to do. And it doesn't make them bad storytellers. It's just their choice. But some storytellers just overload their scenes, and they just want to do so much inside of the scene. And it's not that you don't need to do that to do a movie. To tell a story for the service of a screenplay that is to be interpreted into a movie or a film does not require it to be a play. You know, if you're going to make a play, you can make a play. You know, I write plays myself as well. I think that's fun, but it's not required. It's something that it's a story that you tell in pictures. If I want to strike another analogy, that analogy for me is that at a certain point for me, and this goes towards the root of the question, is that when you get you figure out your voice, it becomes a lot like playing music. And it's like you're not reading music anymore. While you play it, you're just kind of improvising a little bit, and you're just kind of like going with the feel, you know, while you're jamming or whatever. And the classic example for me is Thelonious Monk, because the thing about Thelonious Monk that I loved, that reminds me of screenwriting, is that he has this syncopation. It sounds Ray Charles too. It's also a great one. He has this syncopation that it's not what he's playing. It's not the chord that he's hitting. You know, it's what's between it. It's the stop. It's in between it. That is where you feel the story he's telling in the music. And then the same thing, I believe, applies towards a good screenplay, you know. Yeah.